Donnybrook Farr. The sweet science, like an old rap or the memory of love, follows its victim everywhere. When Phil Drake, a horse, not a prize fighter, won the Epsom Derby of 1955 at odds of 12-1, I had 5 knickers, Mayfair for pounds, on his nose. After deducting another 5 I had bet on one of the losers, I had a net profit of 55 quid, better than $150, which I took with me to the champagne bar under the grandstand. After a race won by a 12-1 shot, it is the most accessible section of the buffet. While there, I caught sight of some English boxing writers I know and wanted to see. They were struggling to reach a more animated and less expensive sector of the bar. It was a shame I had to down my champagne so quickly, but there wasn't enough to go around, so I finished it off and then sneaked up behind them, saying something about the smallness of the world. It was at the bar, with my profits in my pocket and my champagne in me, that I learned there was soon to be a 15-round fight in Dublin for the featherweight championship of Europe. The defending champion, a Frenchman named Ray Famechon, had been induced to go there to fight the challenger, a boy from the north of Ireland, but not a Protestant, known as Billy Spider II Kelly. This Kelly, my friends said, was the British and British Empire champion and a man of promise. One could fly to Dublin in a little more than an hour and return just as expeditiously the morning after the battle. But what decided me to go was the news that the fight was going to be held in Donnybrook, an outlying part of Dublin that is universally synonymous with an unofficial free-for-all fight. Professional fights have been less numerous in Dublin, but some of them have been illustrious. Pierce Egan, the blind raftery of the London prize ring, was a part-time Dublin man himself and has recounted the triumphs of Dan Donnelly, the first great Irish heavyweight, against 2 Englishmen whose names escape my memory. They fought on the turf of the Curragh, a racecourse where, I am reliably informed by Tim Costello, a restaurateur of my acquaintance, small boys are still led out to view Donnelly's heel prints. Dan was no tippy-toes fighter, and although he fought the Englishmen separately, he could have beaten them both together, make no doubt of it. Within my own lifetime, Battling Siki, the ingenuous Senegalese known to legend as the ignoble Savage, was lured to Dublin to defend the world's light heavyweight title, which he had acquired from Georges Carpentier, against Mike McTeague, an Irishman polished by travel. The bout was on March 17, 1923, and McTeague got the decision. McTeague's home ground's success appeared to be the precedent most plausibly applicable to the proposed match at Donnybrook, for I knew that Famechon, who has boxed in the United States, was hardly likely to fell Kelly like an ox. The biggest piece of an ox Famechon has ever felled, I imagine, is a tournedos. The boxing writers told me that the referee was to be a neutral, appointed by the European Boxing Union, but even a neutral might prove suggestible at Donnybrook. When I got my Aer Lingus ticket and reservation, Aer Lingus is the Irish airline, I found that the line had put on extra flights, rolling out old DC-3s, which take 2.5 hours for the trip, to supplement their new English-built Viscounts, which take only an hour and 25 minutes. Because I applied late, I was put on a DC-3. When I came aboard, the only vacant seat was next to a large, fair-haired man of resolute and familiar appearance. The seats were narrow, the legroom was limited, and it was easy to see why the place next to the big fellow had been left to the last. To establish relations, I asked him how much he weighed, and he said, as if used to being asked the question, 14 stone 11.5, which works out to 207.5 pounds. I said, I weigh 16 stone, very nearly. Very nearly 17, I meant. We scrunched together like bulls in a horse trailer, and he grunted, I'm only 3 pound more than when I fought Joe Louis. Did you? I asked politely. If I didn't, I don't know who put the ruddy lumps on my head, he said pleasantly. And the hand-stitched face, with the high cheekbones, narrow eyes, and Rock of Gibraltar chin, came back to me out of the late 30s. He was Tommy Farr, the old Welsh heavyweight who went 15 rounds with Joe Louis in 1937. There is a half-established legend in Britain that he was twisted out of the decision, which he wasn't. Farr does nothing actively to favor the myth, but he doesn't discourage it either. He also fought a series of savage bouts with varied fortunes against fellows like Max Baer, and against them he thinks he got all the worst of it when he lost. But I love the States, he said. I made a lot of money there. That's what I fought for, eh? Money. He rubbed a thumb like a hammer against a rectangular index finger. 296 fights I had. Do you think it was for a Rudy lark? I said no, and he said, it was my profession. I well and truly served my apprenticeship. And then I wanted money. That's why they didn't like me over there at first. The press didn't like me. Because I didn't let them mess me about, that's why. I wanted my rest. Didn't want them banging about downstairs after 11. My manager had a fridge full of liquor for them, and he'd bring them in all hours. All right for him, wasn't it? He didn't have to fight. They liked him fine. Robbed me of 50 or 60,000 quid, they did. I asked him how the American press had robbed him of 50 or 60,000 pounds, and he explained that it was by saying he would have no chance against Lewis. Spoiled the gate, they did, he said. I tried to console him by recalling how extravagantly they had praised him after the fight, but he grumbled, that didn't help the gate. Somehow, the money had slipped between the hard knuckles, so now he said he was launched on a second career. I asked him what it was. He was looking fit and prosperous in a smashing dark gray pinstriped suit and wearing a good thin watch. In the light of this exterior, I was scarcely prepared for his answer. I'm a writer, he said. I love writing. I give it to them straight. No split affinitives, you know, or other Oxford stoof. Oh, of course, I split an affinitive now and then, to show I know how, but I don't believe in it. He was writing boxing, he told me, for the Sunday Pictorial, a once-a-week tabloid with a circulation of 5.5 million that was creeping up on the 8 million circulation of the older established phenomenon, the News of the World. I thank God I have found a way to make a living for my dear wife and kids, Farr said. It seems I'm a natural-born writer. I've had 5 revisions of contracts since I came with the Pictorial. He was going to report the fight, and I asked him for a bit of professional insight on Kelly. He's a very methodical boxer, he said, with a fine sense of anticipation. It was to prove a practically perfect synopsis of Kelly. He might have added only that Kelly too often anticipates the worst. Farr's experience in the United States was much in his mind. I couldn't be a good-time Charlie, he said. When I was a kid, I was taught not to talk or joke or laugh at the table. You come here to eat, my old man used to say to me. When you eat, go. A man can't change from what he's brought up to be, can he? He wasn't a bad old man. He taught me the importance of a good left. He was very aggressive. When he was fighting, they used to say he was a throwback to the caveman. When you go into the ring, you're a hunter, he'd say. Don't hop about like you were fighting in a Rudy balloon on the end of a stick. Farr told me he had written in the Pictorial that Don Cockle, the Englishman who recently tried to take Marciano's heavyweight crown in San Francisco, had no sympathy coming. He had 16 pound on Marciano, Farr said. He should have set about him. I got 108 letters, all approving. My boss got 19 letters, all disapproving. He phoned me up. That's grand, he said. Keep up the good work. There'll be something extra in the post for you tomorrow. Farr said he was going to spend the night at the Royal Hibernian Hotel, where his paper had reserved a room for him, and it was there that I, too, eventually found a room. I met him again at dinner. He was eating with 3 businessmen from Derry, young Kelly's hometown, whom he had taken into the aura of his greatness. Between courses he autographed cards for the young busboys and the waiters. "Is it true that you fought Joe Louis, Mr. Farr?" they would ask him, and he would reply with a rugged laugh, "If I didn't, I don't know who put the ruddy lumps on my head." It had happened before the little busboys were born, and they thought of it as something historic. After dinner, a modest collation of honeydew melon and dinde de saumon au chablis, the Irish salmon being exceptional, the 5 of us drove to Donnybrook in the dairyman's car. The streets were full of automobiles from the north of Ireland and the 3 free counties of Ulster. My associates could pick them out by the license plates. One car we came up behind had a hand-lettered sign on its rear window, reading, "Won't you come into my parlour," said the spider to the ray. Farr, who, like most Welshmen, can sing, paid his passage with the Londonderry air. "It used to be my specialty," he said, and he broke forth, "Oh, Danny boy, "Tallura-loo-loo-lura-loo, oh, Danny boy, tallura-loo-loo, oh, come ye back." We were the success of the cavalcade. The fight, as I knew by that time, having had a chance to read an evening newspaper, was to be held in a monster garage, just built by the municipality to house all the omnibuses of Dublin. 6,750 chairs had been borrowed from caterers and undertakers. The one I got was tagged O'Connell's, but I don't know which line of work O'Connell is in. The bout was being staged by Jack Solomons, the London promoter, with the cooperation of the officials in charge of Antostal, a kind of Gaelic Old Home Week, which included an ecclesiological exhibition at Maynooth, a children's art competition, and an event listed in the papers as Dunleary, Blackrock Cayley, Antostal, Arison Bale, 8 p.m., and evidently reserved for Gaelic speakers. Famachon was to get £3,000, which makes a tidy sum in francs, $3 million, or even in dollars, $8,400. Kelly was to get £2,000, and, in the unanimous opinion of the dairyman, the European Featherweight Championship as well, after which Solomons had promised him a match with Sandy Sadler for the world's title. Sadler fought Famachon in Paris last year and knocked him out in 6 rounds. Now Famachon was 30 years old and Kelly 23, and both had made the featherweight limit of 126 pounds at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Famachon had been around a long time, a very good fighter by European standards, but not top class by ours. I had heard at the Neutral Corner restaurant in New York, which is an international exchange for trade information, that he was definitely on the downgrade. I had expected a delay at the gate, but Mr. Farr swept me in with him. In the double capacity of journalist and celebrity, he had the run of the house. And an usher conducted me to the O'Connell chair, in the second row ringside, where my neighbors regarded me with the respect due my illustrious sponsorship. The low ceiling of the bus garage kept the cigarette smoke down, and although the soirée had not progressed past the first preliminary, the ring was enveloped in a blue haze, giving the scene the look of a painting of a club fight by Bellows. The strained, awkward boxers in the ring carried out the motif. The salient feature of Stag at Sharkey's, I have always thought, is that both the central figures are simply pushers. The principals in this bout were a Dublin man and a Belfast man, of whom the former was the more inept. After the 5th round, the master of ceremonies announced that the Dublin man had retired, and a buzz of sympathy ran through the hall. The restraint was studious, as if each member of the audience had come to the hall determined to keep his temper. The ushers, who wore badges denominating them stewards, were fanatical about making customers crouch in the aisles while any boxing was going on, and conducted them to their chairs only during the 1-minute intervals between rounds. It was like town hall during a séance of the New Friends of Music. Since horizontal distances were great in the garage, it took some arrivals from 2 to 4 rounds to reach their seats. The round before the Dublin man retired, a small, merry-looking man with a pointy nose and an even more finely pointed waxed mustache, passed along the aisle in front of the first ringside row, bent over like a crab. The man next to me pulled my arm. "It's Alfie Byrne, the Lord Mayor," he said. His lordship was taking no chances of alienating a voter. There was a large Irish harp in electric bulbs on one wall, and another in green paint on the wall opposite. I saw no tricolours. The ambiance warmed a bit with the next bout, a lightweight match between a heavy-muscled, picnic Galwayman, not much more than 5 feet tall, named McCoy, and a more conventionally constructed fellow from Belfast named Sharp. Belfast, like most industrial cities, produces a large crop of boxers. Galwaymen in popular myth are hot-tempered and unpredictable, and transplanted Galwaymen, of whom there were many in the audience, are vociferously loyal. The little fellow started out at a terrific pace, moving his arms as if in a pillow fight. A cry of, "Up Galway! Come on, McCoy!" spontaneously dispelled the decorum of the evening. It seemed impossible that Mackay could keep on moving his arms at that rate for more than a minute, but he did, and the astonished Belfast man, after waiting for him to run down, joined in the fun. But each time Sharp administered to the animated half-keg a conventional uppercut to the chin, he knew the antidotes academically prescribed for a violent attack by a short opponent. Mackay would loose a flurry of blows that reminded me of a passage in the Song of Roland. I will strike 700 or 1,000 good blows. 699 or 998 would miss, but for the Belfast man it was like trying to hit through an electric fan. The fellow sitting next to me jiggled with the effort of maintaining his composure. He seemed to be in the grip of an electric vibrator. After every round he would grab me and ask, "Would you say the little fellow is ahead now?" I would nod, and he would turn and grab the fellow on the other side, a sporty type who was escorting a platinum blonde. This Blazes Boylan, it is impossible to be in Dublin without Joyce, was a purist. "Sharp as landing the cleaner punches," he would say. The man between us would wait until Blazes turned back to the blonde, and then pluck my arm again. "Do you know," he would say in a conspirational way, "I don't agree with that man at all." Neither did the referee, who gave the decision to Mackay and perpetual motion. There are no judges at European professional bouts, and the referee decides. My neighbor and I exchanged friendly glances, secure in our connoisseurship. The announcer now had his great moment. "My Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen," he called, and began introducing visiting celebrities. Freddie Mills, the Englishman who briefly held the light heavyweight championship of the world before Joey Maxim won it, my sponsor Farr, who got a great hand, and climactically the original Spider Kelly, the father of the hero of the evening. I had heard of at least one earlier Spider Kelly, the man who said to his seconds, "What I need ain't advice, it's strength." But that had been in California, and it would have been a quibble to bring it up at Donnybrook. The original Irish Spider Kelly was a puckish little man with a red face and heavy black eyebrows. He had held the British and British Empire featherweight championships himself 20 years before, I knew from my newspaper fill-in, and had guided Spider II's instruction from his first tottering essays at footwork. The audience included many fathers, more sons, and quite a number of mothers and sisters. There was also a good speckling of Roman collars. A cheer for old Spider was an endorsement of the principle of the family, and he got it. A fanfare of hunting horns was sounded at the remote end of the garage, and another cheer began, distant at first, louder as its object approached the ring. It was Spider II, surrounded by his faction. He was a baby-faced boy with a crew cut who looked more like 18 than 23. The calves of his legs resembled those of a school quarter-miler, large and rounded, but his torso and arms, white and boyish, were less impressively developed. The Frenchman, whose entry was heralded by another but less enthusiastic fanfare, was sleek, wide-shouldered, long-armed, and spindle-shanked. He looked not much younger than Spider I, but his antiquity inspired no comparable demonstration of respectful affection by the crowd. The master of ceremonies implored the audience to stop smoking during the coming contest, and all the men within my sight extinguished their cigarettes. He next introduced the boxers, giving their weights to the ounce. Kelly had a 10-ounce weight advantage. And finally, the referee, who received a polite, unsuspicious cheer. I did not hear his name, but the man next to me said, "Some kind of a Dutchman." It appeared likely, for the referee had the buttery tint so common among Hollanders, and walked about the ring with the exaggerated spryness of a Teuton being dashing. He had a snipe nose that pointed at the ceiling, and held himself so straight that his Adam's apple created a noticeable deviation from the vertical, pushing a neat bow tie in front of it. The gong rang, and the men came timidly from their corners amid thunderous cheers. "Don't let us pretend to be impartial," a fellow wrote in the Irish press the next morning. "We all wanted the best man to win, and Billy Kelly was the best man for us." Confirming Farr's description, Kelly went to work methodically. He landed a light tap on the Frenchman's nose, parried a return with his right, and then tapped twice more. Famechon floundered at him a bit, like a fellow reaching over a man's shoulder to shake hands with someone behind him, and the round ended with no damage to either. The man next to me turned his face from the carnage and said, "Is he doing all right?" I showed him my program, on which I had marked the round even, and he said, "That other fellow has a very dangerous look." After the second round, Kelly settled down to work, and a very promising workman he looked, drawing leads, popping the slower Frenchman with fast, precise jabs, and once, in the fourth, even landing a really good right uppercut to the diaphragm in close. When Famechon started to punch, Kelly would be going in another direction. Usually when the Frenchman got close to him, Kelly would cease trying to do harm and concentrate on escape, as if he were fighting a middleweight instead of a gaffer his own size. He was good at ducking and slipping away, but nobody was ever hurt by being ducked away from. Still, he outboxed his man round after round. I gave him 4 in a row, and the bus garage swelled with the sound of shouting. The jabs had little sting, but since Kelly was younger than Famechon, it appeared reasonable that he would keep on piling up points as the fight went on, and at the end would take the decision. By the 7th, Famechon, having apparently decided that the boy couldn't hurt him at all, was rushing after him, slapping and pushing, but unable to accomplish much. And so they went, round after round, Kelly almost never using his right except to block and never following an advantage beyond a second or third light pop when he had his man set up for a real one. At the beginning of every round he crossed himself, and whenever Famechon's slaps strayed low, he would look appealingly at the referee. As they came up for the 15th, I had them all square on my card, 6 rounds for each and 2 even, but I had a feeling that Kelly's margins had been a trifle clearer. I gave him the final round, which was as tantalizingly ineffectual as all the others, and as hard to pick a winner in. Just the same, I was sure that Spider the Second deserved the decision, and meanly suspected that he would be sure to receive it, even if he hadn't done quite so well. It was then that the Dutchman, to quote one Irish writer, rose Famechon's hand. I thought I could write a fair account of what followed, but when I saw the story on the first page of the Irish press next morning, I realized that the writer, a Mr. John Healy, had probably had more experience in that kind of going. There was a long pause as a stunned audience, who had watched the young Spider swap punches at a terrific pace in the last 2 rounds, slowly gathered what it meant. Billy Kelly had lost the fight. And then, slowly at first, until it gathered momentum and burst like a rumbling volcano, they got to their feet and cut loose with a solid barrage of catcalls, boos, whistles, and shouts. Angry spectators swarmed up to and tried clambering over the press table. A bottle whizzed over my head into the ring. I missed this, or at any rate it missed me. A coat flung in rage flapped on the ropes. It did. Chairs were bumbled. A squad of Gardaí and plainclothes detectives surrounded the ring. Gardaí is Gaelic for uniformed police, and monstrous big ones these were. They were still booing and cheering Billy when he was escorted from the ring minutes later. All down that long avenue of jam-packed people they screamed their admiration. "You're the winner, Billy!" or "You're the champ!" Grown men cried their rage in the sea of faces. That's just about the way it was. Taking a more moderate line, Mr. Ben Keeley on the sports page wrote, "There's no doubt in the world about it. The raising of Ray Famechon's hand was one of the greatest shocks in Franco-Irish history, because for the crowd in the Donnybrook garage, Billy Kelly was the man for their money." Famechon, whose 103rd professional fight it was, looked relieved but not astonished. He probably thought he had won, as any fighter does who has made it at all close. Kelly sat in his corner with his head almost between his knees, the picture of dejection, like a bright boy who has failed to get 100 in an arithmetic test because the teacher came up with the wrong answer. He had played it safe for 15 rounds and failed to obtain the reward of thrift and diligence. The most interesting figure in the ring, for many reasons, was the referee. The man about to get lynched is undeniably the center of attention at a lynching. It is unlikely that it had occurred to him when he rose Famechon's hand that he would be immoderately happy to see the Amsterdam airport again. The Kelly rooters were standing in the aisles and on the undertaker's chairs, which assumed a new significance. Devil an usher could make devil a customer sit down. The referee, encouraged by a number of big men in mufti, probably detectives who had entered the ring, got as far as the ropes, climbed through them to the ring apron, and stood there like a fellow who has never gone off a diving board and wishes he hadn't walked out to the end. He was as pale as the inside of a Gouda cheese. The Gardaí marched to the edge of the ring below him and formed a phalanx into which they lowered him down. They then marched him forward with the Dutchman in the center. A small man in a raincoat tried to cut in from the rear, swinging a punch under a cop's armpit. The Garda turned around, laughed, and slung him about 20 feet, using the man's raincoat as a hammer thrower uses the wire on the hammer. The Lord Mayor slunk out as self-effacingly as he had entered. The wild shouting continued, the ushers were ignored for another 5 minutes, and then everybody began to laugh and chat and light up cigarettes again, in preparation for the bouts that would wind up the program. It was apparently permissible to suffocate all boxers except those in the main event. Since the tag end of the program was of small interest, I soon made my way out into the night and a pouring rain. By the time I got back to the Royal Hibernian, Mr. Farr was established before a late snack of cold chicken and cold ham, with a few bottles of Guinness. He said he had already filed his story for the Sunday Pictorial, and readily recited what he thought the best bits of it for me. Like me, he thought Kelly had deserved to win. "Kelly has nothing for the seeker of blood and thunder, but those who enjoy the grace of movement and textbook punching will be fully satisfied by the Derry craftsman," he said, which is the way it appeared in the pictorial, except for the Welsh stresses. He writes a very pretty style. He thought, though, that Kelly had been overcautious, that he had had little to beat. We adjourned to the lounge, in which bona fide residents are allowed to drink as late as the night porter, a crabbed old humorist, will serve them, and there were joined by a number of gentlemen from Northern Ireland, including the trio who had transported us to the fight. Before bringing us a new round of drinks, the porter would make each of us give his room number, and we would count off, beginning with a Mr. Cassidy from Derry, I think he had number 58, and going all the way round to a man from Donegal whose name I forget, but who weighed 18 stone 7 and collected first editions. It was not so much that the porter expected our bona fide status to change between rounds, I think, as that he wished to determine our degree of responsibility. A fellow who forgot the number of his room might have been refused the next drink, but nobody did forget. Mr. Farr, who had switched from Guinness to Cointreau, was naturally the oracle of the occasion, and won the golden opinion of all until he burst out ingenuously, "The truth is that the lad fights like he was a ruddy balloon at the end of a ruddy stick. Every time t'other lad hit him in the goot, he looked at the referee. Is the referee his ruddy grandmother? Was he too proud to reciprocate?" He rose, granitic and dignified. "I must take an early plane in the morning," he said, "back to my sweet wife and wonderful children. Each Saturday afternoon I take the kids to the cinema and tea. High tea." He made his way to the lift, the pattern of a literary man who leads a sane family life. I stayed on until the porter himself decided to go to bed at dawn. He has insomnia in the dark, he said.